So that's the most important part. Second one, vagal nerve dysfunction. So I want you guys to do something for me. Put your hand on your abdomen, okay? And take a deep breath in without lifting your shoulders up, okay? So your stomach should come out, and you almost feel like tightness in your chest, and you let go. Have you ever had a shiver go down your back before? That's the vagal nerve, okay? And the vagal nerve can be triggered from the very breath that you just used, okay? It runs down the left side of the neck. This must be a mirror image because this person's holding the right side. Just realized that. And the main factor is it affects your gut motility. So motility is a fancy term for movement, how your gut moves things through, okay? The vagal nerve has a lot of other functions, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because that's a whole 3-credit course in itself. But gut motility gets affected. This is an article that was published actually last year on traumatic brain injury causing intestinal damage. Right? Well, that's kind of weird. I hit my head and my gut's damaged, right? This is how it happens. The vagal nerve is a cranial nerve, as Ty was talking about, that runs down the left side of the neck. And so when you get whiplash, you can end up damaging the communication of this nerve. So it's really important to understand that you're not damaged. Your communication is all out of whack. Your immune system might be out of whack. You could have some damage in your brain if it's confirmed structurally, but a lot of times the brain, like Ty said, is plastic. It's able to change. The gut is the same way. And there's actually some really cool therapies, for instance, something called VIP therapy. I call it very important peptide. It actually stands for vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, but I call it very important peptide for ease of understanding. It has actually shown to reverse gray matter damage in the brain. And it is a peptide hormone that is disrupted from head injury. And Ty talked about the fight and flight and the rest and digest state. There's actually another one that we go into called the faint or freeze state. When we're in fight or flight for too long, we go into the overwhelm, I can't, I'm depressed, I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, and we actually start preparing for death. In some extreme cases where people have been in fight or flight for a long time, they get up here, and you can bounce in and out of that, where you're fight, flight, but then you're faint, freeze, fight, flight, faint, freeze. So if we're all gazelles out on the Serengeti, and a lion jumps through that window, right? We're all going to run. And hopefully I can run faster than at least one of you, and I'll be okay. But as we run, we go into the fight or flight state. And the fight or flight state activates us so we can get the hell out of Dodge. When we get caught, we might fight for a while until we realize that we're screwed, right? And in that case, we actually play dead. And this is a thing that's gone on for a long time. We start playing dead. We hope the lion leaves us alone long enough for us to get away, and then we can lay in bed down somewhere and just hope to God we heal. We don't have doctors out on the Serengeti, so we hope we heal. This is what happens to humans as well. When we go into fight or flight too long, whatever puts us there can send us up into the faint, freeze, and play dead, because our nervous system literally thinks that the assault that is on the system is so bad that we might die. And people get suicidal ideations. You don't want to necessarily commit suicide. Your brain is coming to grips with the fact that you might not live. The funny thing is you will, right? You might just deal with chronic problems. So I like to talk about that because there's sometimes a lot of confusion, and even a lot of doctors don't know that that's what happens. So we measure this through heart rate variability, okay? Ty measures it through the eyes like a messiah. I need technology to do it. But you can look at heart rate variability, and the ability when you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up. When you breathe out, it slows down. And this is how it should look. In dysfunctional cases, you'll see stuff like this. And this is a faint or freeze or play dead response. So it might be as simple as you go from sitting to standing and you get dizzy and you have to sit back down. Your blood pressure might drop, your heart rate might increase, and it's something called POTS if it gets severe enough. Has anyone heard of that before? POTS syndrome? Okay, it's called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. For lack of a better term, it is the feeling like you're going to faint when you stand up, or you go from laying to sitting to standing. Anytime you have a change in gravity. Faint freeze, play dead. Another example of somebody who's stuck in faint freeze, play dead, very low heart rate, just kind of vibrating across, and then fight or flight dominance. See how very different those are? And everybody needs to be treated different depending on what state they're in, okay? So in terms of this process, things that you can do, heart rate variability training. There's an amazing company called HeartMath. You can get little devices that actually train your brain to subconsciously breathe deeper and stimulate the vagus nerve. There's a vagal nerve stimulation devices now that are non-surgical, which is really exciting. And if you guys want, ask me after. I can get you the names of those. Singing and humming. The louder we sing, the more vagal nerve stimulation we get. I'm not going to sing for you because I'm horrendous, but very, very good. Gargling can stimulate the vagus nerve. Nature, being in nature is actually shown to stimulate the vagus nerve as well. And then there's something that is my new obsession called EGG, electrogastrography, okay, or electrogastrogram. It is the electrical activity from the gut. And a lot of, so this is interesting. Now, a lot of the research is in, of course, what we call functional digestive disorders. So, you go into your doctor, you have some gut problems, nothing major. You might have GERD, reflux. How many people in here are practitioners, by the way? Any doctors, clinicians, practitioners? Great. What's your specialty? Yeah. You were the only one who put your hand up, so. Lone Ranger.
I am a massage therapist for 12 years and I specialize in osteopathic protocols.
Great.
I'm an osteopath. I've now just switched into neurokinetics called.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
There's a lot to do with stimulating the neural pathways to clear out the blockages from inflammation and stuff, to get blood flow flowing properly so that the neural pathways can support themselves.
Yeah, that's great. I was just wondering how big of language I should use. So, electrogastrogram allows us to quantify this. And so in functional digestive disorders, oftentimes we have these really invasive procedures where we scope people and we don't find anything. We might run a stool test, we don't find anything, and then we just go, well, there's nothing wrong, right? Well, actually, one aspect of head injury is something called retrograde peristalsis, which means that the movement in the gut's going the wrong way in certain places. This is going to drive inflammation. It's going to affect a whole ton of problems. So this is actually something where we're actually getting into, coming soon, we're getting into with a partner from MIT and UC San Diego on developing this software, on this technology. The main reason being the EGG is actually shown in research, the electrical activity in the gut, to influence the brain activity. Okay? Not always the other way around, which is what we used to think. So not only do we have a chemical immune compromise that can be going on down there, we have an electrical problem sometimes as well. Eating disorders, 70% of eating disorders relate to this, not to the brain. It's not a psychiatric component most of the time. Another interesting fact. So this is what happens if it happens in the gut, in the stomach, is your stomach tries to push things down, and then the valve closes at the wrong time. It gets the wrong electrical information, the neurons fire, they close, and everything backs up. This is called GERD, right? Well, now we know it can happen through the entire rest of the digestive tract, and it's going to cause a ton of problems if that's happening. And that's just a little bit of research on the actually the POTS that I was talking about, blood pressure problems, heart rate regulation problems. All right. Next one is emotional limbic. Now, this is one of the founders of the Institute for Functional Medicine. Stress is a thought, a perception of a threat, even if it's not real. That's it, no more, no less. If that's true, then we have complete control over stress because it's not something that happens to us, but something that happens in us. And I'm going to talk to you guys about the region of the brain that's associated with perceived threat, right? Whether our system's going to think it's a threat or not. Something that really stimulates this is adverse childhood experiences, okay? These are things that happen to us while we're developing early in life. Birth trauma is a very good example because the brain areas that regulate this response are online while we're, when we're being born, while we're in our mom's womb. There's the largest human health study in the history of the world was called the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And they basically gave people a questionnaire that had 10 questions talking about whether you had sexual abuse, physical abuse, whether somebody went to jail, whether parents divorced, some normal life event stuff, some abnormal life event stuff. And the higher the score, the more significant health problems people had across every single type of health problem. Cancer, inflammatory problems, mental health disorders, psychiatric, everything was up regulated when we had more adverse childhood experiences. It turns out that a head injury is no different. The resiliency to recover from a head injury is related to our emotional experiences. And this is what it looks like in a brain map when you're having the emotional limbic hijacking. You may just have brain fog. You may just have memory issues. You may not be feeling overly emotional and you can still be having this problem. So really fascinating. And 95% of the decisions made by the brain are actually emotional, unless we logically shut them down. The initial reaction is an emotional response. Importance to head injury, what does that have to do with anything? Well, neuroplasticity, which is what Ty was talking about, the ability for the brain to be able to change requires certain molecules. And those molecules are suppressed when the limbic system or the emotional system is active. So it's really important to address. And I know from my experience dealing with people with chronic illness, chronic problems are a trauma in themselves, believe it or not. Some of you are like, well, yeah, duh, right? A lot of practitioners don't recognize it that way. They don't recognize it as an emotional trauma. And so this is what happens. This is how the limbic system functions, okay? When we first start driving, right, we see all these things and we're going slow. I was driving in Ireland actually on my honeymoon 2 years ago, and you have to drive on the other side of the road, and you have to drive on the other side of the car, and all the cars are standard, so you have to shift with the wrong hand. And I felt like I was 14 again, driving for the first time. Okay, the left side of the road, right? I'm seeing everything, and that's what we see. And then as we get better and we get more comfortable, we might only see these things, right? We'll see the cops and we see the lights and everything like that. And then over time, we start just seeing the really important things. We're just kind of default mode, going with the motion. And this is exactly what the emotional limbic does, okay? It's supposed to do. It's supposed to filter out stuff that's really not a threat. Guess what happens after you have a head injury and you lose your health? Now your limbic system can be primed to react to all of these little things. So you go back to this again, because it's trying to pay attention to everything. Oh, I have this little pain in my head. Oh my God, a migraine starting, and boom, your system kicks into overload. And it's hard to shut down. Whoops. There is a great way to measure this, and again, I could nerd out all day about it, but when you flash a stimulus to the brain, before we're even conscious of it, your brain actually makes a decision on what it thinks with the frontal lobe. The right front activates, it disagrees, it wants to avoid. If the left frontal lobe activates, it agrees and it wants to approach. Even me talking right now, before you actually are consciously aware of what I'm saying, it takes between 300 and 500 milliseconds for you to be aware of it. This decision's already been made. And then you have the internal conversation of what you think about it. Sometimes if it's a strong avoidance pattern, you're going to get a strong fight or flight reaction from it. And this is more pronounced in head injury. And these connections are formed early in infancy, right? Adopted children have more problems with the limbic system, no matter how good the adoptive parents are, okay? And this is resiliency in brain injury related to that. So what can you do? So if you do truly have a trauma subtype, and again, this is very common, another type of practitioner people oftentimes have to work with. We love neurofeedback. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it later because of our ability to be able to teach the brain how to regulate itself on a subconscious level. It's very cool. There is emotional freedom techniques, which I'm not well versed in at all. Our neurokinetic therapist back there maybe knows a bit more about that. And then there's EMDR brain spotting techniques done through a psychologist. And a lot of people might think it's a little bit weird, like I have a head injury and you're sending me to a psychologist. It's extremely helpful. Okay. So neurofeedback is just basically a live time image of the brain where we pick up how it's behaving and we either decide to feed back information or we don't. It's a reward punishment sort of scenario. And we actually trick the brain into functioning better by just feeding back activity. We do some other neuromodulation techniques as well. And just another look at kind of how that works. The fourth one is metabolic. So our metabolic activity. This is me working out back in high school, trying to bulk up. Didn't work, as you can see. But we need something called mitochondria. Okay, it's called the powerhouse of the cell. And mitochondria are kind of like, they house all of these, it's basically like a big windmill factory. So you've ever seen those big wind farms? You drive by and there's windmills everywhere. I know there's some out east of Stettler. That's kind of what our mitochondria are. They hold all these, and this is what they look like. They're old bacteria that produce energy. So they bring in carbs, fats, and proteins, and then they spit out energy for us, right? What a great relationship. That's kind of what it looks like. And this is what it looks like when you have metabolic problems in the brain, okay? Depending on where the metabolic problem's happening or the energy production problem's happening, you're going to get all sorts of different types of symptoms. If it's happening back in the cerebellum or up on the top of the brain here, you're going to get balance problems, coordination problems, visual problems, dizziness, okay? If it's happening in the temporal lobes, you're going to get mood regulation problems and